Okay, today we're going to be working on a 1999 Sierra 3/4 ton 3-door extended cab. The problem with it is the oil cooler hose lines. Alright, so what we've got here, kind of got it tore apart partially right now to take a look, plus my my camera was, the battery was dead on it. So let me get started here. Anyway, what's going on is it's leaking real bad underneath the vehicle, so it leaked a good amount. So each night when I drove it, it's been leaking for several years and I just never got around to fixing it. So first thing to do, it's these cooler lines, at least on this 3/4 ton here. It's this line here that goes into the oil cooler, and you can see the line down below. I have it disconnected. So that had those little clips on there, so you had to pull back the little plastic cover. I think it's meant to keep dirt and stuff out of that little clip. And then I pulled the clip out and was able to just kind of wiggle the line back and forth, and just in a few minutes it popped, or a few seconds really, it popped out. Here's what the little clip looks like. So one thing I did do, I squirted some liquid wrench on there a few days before and let it soak, so that might have helped. Now those lines go down and around, and you can see them right there, and they go in kind of underneath the power steering pump. Alright, so reading up on the web, you know, I was debating on how to work on this thing, how to get the things. I wasn't sure, so what I've done is I removed the front right tire. I have taken off the oil filter, which is really not needed, but you know, if I did it again, I don't know that I'd pull off the oil filter. And at any rate, up above, it's really a bad place to see, is the so I can get my camera. So here is the kind of the manifold up here. I've got it loose now. Okay, it had two 10mm bolts in it. Switch right off to the side from the oil filter. So I was able to, leaving the drive shaft here, just reach up. I used a 1/4-inch drive ratchet with a 3-inch extension and a 1-inch extension, so I needed 4 inches, and that let me ratchet it out. Just took a few seconds to get it broke loose. Now you can see the lines go along the top of the oil pan, and this was the biggest trick, or this is one of the big discoveries. It has one bracket that's bolted on, and I didn't know where it was. So I reached around, tried to reach it from in behind here, tried to do all kinds of things, and I finally found where the bolt is. Now one thing, here's the new line set. Now this is different than what's on there. What I have there, the line comes out here, and then one line comes up from above. Now this, if you go on GM's website, this shows that this is the right part number. I don't know if it is or not. I'm going to have to get it out and look at it. I mean, it looks reasonable, except this is not the same. So when I get the line out, I'll show it to you. But maybe they've, you know, maybe they've got a couple different ones. But this bracket here was this bolt that holds the hoses in place, the lines. That's what I was having trouble finding. So let me show you what I found. So I was trying to reach it from the back and from the side, and when I pulled off the wheel, I could see the head of the nut, but I really didn't know how to get there. Well, it turns out it's really pretty easy. It's just, at least I haven't seen it documented anywhere. So that's what I'm trying to do, is document it for you. So that bolt, hopefully, I'm going to light adjusted right, maybe. That will get it. But down inside here, let's see if I can zoom in on it. I may not be able to. Yeah, there it is. In that, right there's the nut or the bolt, and you can see you can easily, if you take the bottom shield off here, there was a plastic shield, just took 5 15 millimeter bolts to take it out, and then move some of these little heirloom lines around, electric lines, but this guy ends up being just right here. Okay, so it's real easy to get to unbolt it. So anyway, now that my charger is charged a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and take that bolt out, and then I'm hoping, like I say, here again, there it is. That's a 13 millimeter, and I got to it really pretty easy. You know, here's the hoses coming down. Those other little heirloom lines are electric lines. So you just got to kind of pull and push them out of the way. And of course they're old and they broke, but nothing I can do about that. And I'm going to take that bolt out, and then my plan is to pull the lines, pull them back. So I'm going to go from back there at the oil filter, I'm going to pull that down. I'm going to try to pull the line out backwards. Okay, so these lines here, I'll have to work them down, have them hanging out in this area here, and then hopefully I'll be able to pull them back through and get them out. If I get them out, then I'll figure out how to get the new ones back in. Thing that was happening to me, you can see the zoom in here, the ratchet there. It was really hard to get a ratchet in the front here and get it to turn even with a flex head fine tooth ratchet. So to get that thing to come out quicker than spending a whole lot of time, just a notch at a time, I was able to get it with a box end wrench too, but it was still just a tooth at a time. So what I did, since I had already pulled the wheel off, I was able to put 2 10-inch extensions together and shoot through this hole here. And when I did that, now I can ratchet that off in a few seconds. So anyway, just a tip. You might want to try that, and it might be much faster. If you got the wheel off, you know, it only takes a few seconds to take the wheel off anyway. So maybe it does pay to take the wheel off. Anyway, little tip. So now I've pulled the hoses down and got them hanging out the front. So now I'm going to go in the back and try to work them out, pulling them from the front to the rear. Don't know if this is going to work, and really researching this job, there wasn't a lot of information on the web. Some people cut them in half, but then they said they finally worked them in, but they, you know, didn't give any great comment on how they got them in. So anyway, I'm going to give this a try. I'll let you know. I can't hold the camera and do this at the same time. Sorry. It appears that I'm pulling it down. Here is it sticking out. It's coming out. I pulled it behind the exhaust pipe, between the exhaust pipe and the drive shaft, and it's coming pretty good. So I've almost got the whole thing out. Now the question is, what I can't really see is where it's coming from, how to get it back in. So that's going to be the hard part. You can't really get your head up in there and see. I mean, I know it's pulling through, but how is it pulling through? So that's probably going to be the big question is now. I had to try to twist it here in the front, and it came some, but I'm not sure where it came from. So anyway, it does look like it'll come out the back, and it only took like, I don't know, 15 seconds. It pulled right out. So, and I don't have it all the way out, so there could be a problem still. But I wanted to take some pictures and talk about it before I got it all the way out. So anyway, we'll see what happens. I'll try to figure out where it belongs. From where the second ago on the video, I just twisted a little bit more and bang, it came right out. So once I had it unhooked, had that bolt out, pulling it out the rear end and kind of twisting it, and I had to come up to the top here, up to the front, and help twist it a little bit because where it was wanting to get stuck on this, where the bolt goes in. But it came right out really quick. I thought I would be here forever. Now, the big question is, it appears to be much different than the original line. So I don't know if that's what it should be or not. So looking up on the GM Parts Direct website, this is the right part number, but as you can see, it's much different. The big thing is here is the way it is. Is that going to fit up? Are those lines going to come up and around and be okay? Now it kind of looks like if you hold it up and line up the bolt holes, the bracket lines up here. So maybe those high up lines will clear. Okay. Then it looks like the hydraulic lines, both of them are much longer. So I'm not sure which way is going to be right. It looks much different. I know that the hoses are gonna bend around, but it sure looks a lot different. I don't know if it's gonna. Maybe it said something about cutting a hole in the shroud. So maybe they've just taken this cooler lines from another vehicle and said, okay, look, we don't have to make 2 sets, we'll make this one work. So I don't know what I'm going to have to do, but I'll get back to you. Also wanted to mention, when I went to take these lines off of the radiator, I did remove the battery. So it only took a few seconds. I took the battery out. That made it much easier to get to those little clips. So probably wouldn't have to, but for the bottom one, it made it much easier. So it only took a few minutes to do. I got it back up in there, and the only way I could get it up and in was to take the drive shaft down. I didn't take the drive shaft out. I just laid it down against the exhaust, and that was enough to give me room to twist this, manifold around. So I went up through the exhaust, back between the exhaust and the transmission, right up through here, and but I did have to take the drive shaft off. I've seen some comments where people said, oh yeah, take the drive shaft out, but they didn't really say why. So what the deal is, you've got to twist that thing. You can see now the tubes are hanging down out front, so I think they're going to be okay. Who knows? I haven't really looked. But and it looks like where these hoses or those tubes are much different than what was original equipment on this thing. It doesn't look like that's going to hit. That's not going to hurt anything. But this thing was so much different than the original one. That was the problem. The original one actually went in and out fairly easy. So to get the new one in, though, I had to remove this drive shaft and just set it down. So just take the caps off of it, set it down, and once I did that, I messed around for probably 20 minutes trying to twist it around. It was kind of running into the oxygen sensor also. So hopefully I didn't hurt my oxygen sensor, but you might have pulled the oxygen sensor out, but hey, the drive shaft's easier than the oxygen sensor. So that's what I did. Now we'll go up front and see. Hopefully these things poked out the right place, but I haven't looked yet. Yeah, they did. So the hoses are above that wire loom. Okay, so now these things are going to be crazy because they're so much longer and so much bent different than the original equipment. You know, I think I can make it work. And just a note there, I taped off the ends and taped off that spacer, or that, not a spacer, but that cap that goes over the snaps, so I wouldn't lose those. But I guess they wouldn't have went far. They could have only went back to the hose. It didn't matter. But at any rate, I'm not sure how I'm going to bend these things around to get them to stay there. So it's much on this 99 6.0, much different than the original equipment. So like I say, I don't know if they just don't make this one anymore, but the way this thing was made, much less bends, much easier to get through. Those big bends there that come out of the top of that new one made it hard to get the get it around that drive shaft, that oxygen sensor. And then this thing just had little tubes. It had a much longer hose and just little metal tubes that went up to the radiator. You know, this thing is huge, so may have to get my half-inch benders out and kind of help bend them around. I think I'll be able to get it, and it sounds like that's what people have to do, but why they just didn't sell the original equipment part would be much easier. So, all right, thank you. A little tidbit: when I went to screw in the nut that or the bolt that holds that bracket, that 13 millimeter hex-headed bolt, before, you know, it was really easy to take it out from the bottom. And then I said I went through the fender well, or the inner fender, to take it out. Well, to get it to go back in, it let's see if I can. The way that the new tube is bent, you can't hardly see it from down below. So what I ended up doing, I don't know if you can see this or not, but it's right there underneath the tubing. I can see it just barely. So what I was able to do, it lined up perfectly, and I put the bolts in the manifold back there, put the gasket in, anti-seized it all up, and I put the bolts in and I just firmed them up. I didn't tighten them all the way. I didn't want to smash the gasket yet. And then I took my 3/8 ratchet, two 10-inch extensions, so a 20-inch extension, a universal 13 millimeter socket, filled it up with grease to hold the bolt, the hex-headed bolt in. So I stuck it in this way and was able to line up the hole and got it started and got it tight. So just a little tidbit that might help you to get that bolt there, because I think these lines are going to be bent up so much that you definitely want that to be supported there. If not, you don't want that thing, you know, hanging out in the fan someday. So at any rate, that's how I got that 13 millimeter bolt, was the 20-inch extension 3/8 drive, 13 millimeter. To recap here, putting it back together now, and you know, I had to take the drive shaft off to get the that manifold, the back end of the tube up there. What I was doing, I was sticking it right through here. Here's the exhaust, here's the drive shaft. I was sending up through here, and as I was putting it in, it kept hitting that oxygen sensor. So I probably could have taken the oxygen sensor out or the drive shaft, but the drive shaft worked really well. And this maybe gives you a better view too of that of the manifold, the oil cooler manifold that bolts just above the filter there. And like I say, on my original lines, they come out the side and the one come out the top. They weren't near that bent that big and tall like that. It pulled out much easier, but anyway, this ended up going back in. It was pretty hot, pretty tight, and I ended up just having to kind of lay here and work it in really slow, but I was able to get it. Now, one thing up here on the front too, I'll show you. When I was working it in, I brought the lines out here. Here's the bumper part. These lines come out here, and they were just laying out straight. So then the short line was easy enough to turn and send up by the radiator. Okay, but the long line was much, much harder. So actually what I did is I thought I had it in good shape since they were hanging out here. I tightened up the bracket bolt, that 13 millimeter, and I put the bolts in the manifold, and I had it all lined up. I thought I was good, and I tried to get this top hose to go up that direction to go to the radiator, and it would not go. So what I ended up doing is had to pull the bolt back out. Like I said, I used the hole over top of the wheel well that lined up real good with a 13 millimeter and a 3/8 universal joint, two 10-inch extensions, so 20-inch extension. So I got the thing loose again, and I brought that whole assembly, the manifold and stuff, I brought it as far out as I could get it here. Okay, so it ended up the manifold moved forward probably another 6 inches. Then that gave me longer on these flex lines on these hoses. And what I was able to do, I was able to bring it down here. I wish I could have filmed it, but I couldn't. I was able to bring the hose down and bend it right at the at this end right here. And it just like bent at 180 degrees back onto itself. And then up underneath, I was able to get the top of it where it plugs into the radiator. I was able to get it in here by my fan and get it to go underneath the fan, okay, underneath the water pump and the fan, and then I was able to get it turned and headed back up that direction up to the radiator. So before you bolt the thing up, you got to slide the lines out extra far, then get both the lines bent to get them going up in here. Now that's another thing really, I think I bent it just a little bit to get it to come in here. I don't think it hurt it any. And then another thing, I had to kind of bend the line to get it to go in that holder where the hoses were before. I mean, the original hose, much easier, much better to work with. I mean, this must fit other vehicles, and they just said, oh, this will be close enough, it'll work, we'll make it work. So at any rate, before you tighten this stuff up, make sure you get those hoses heading up to the radiator. Then you can put it together and tighten her up. So don't make the mistake I did. Luckily it only took a few minutes. Now here is the top one, and there is the bottom one. And then, like I say, they kind of fit in the bracket. They don't fit like the old hoses did, but I think it'll be fine. It clears the power steering pump. Everything's going to be okay. So they do fit, and this was this GM hose, so it seemed to fit. I know some people complained about the Dorman hoses that were
they didn't fit right. They had to file them or sand them. So here's what I ordered, the Delco 152-03-890. So it sure didn't look like the original one, but it did fit, and it appears to be the same thing as the Dorman hose. So like I say, this original equipment, if they still made it, would be so much easier because it's so much straighter, and then the hoses are long, and they get to be, they're much easier to work their way in and out, more flexible. So I've almost got it back together here. I got to put the drive shaft back together, and then I'll be starting it up here. We'll check back in a few minutes to see if it's leaking anywhere. So we got it started up. Here's the fittings going down below. You can see it very good. So no leaks. There's the hoses. Here to be no leaks. And of course, down below here, nothing leaking. And that's probably the best picture of it. So I got everything tightened back up. Got the drive shaft front end bolted back up. I just got to put the front wheel on. I got to wait for, make sure it didn't leak. And remember, looking down the hole there, doubt that you can see it on this, but taking the tire off. So to recap, the big thing is you got to take that bottom skid plate off, the big plastic one out front. You got to take the front wheel, left side front wheel off. You're going to have to take the shaft, the drive shaft off to the front end, and then that'll let you might as well take it off first because that'll help you get it out. And then the little clips, like I said, I didn't really show taking those apart, but there's plenty of videos how those come apart. And when you put it back together, remember to push it way forward so that it lets those lines come out farther, and then you can put them, once you have them out front, you can an extra 5 or 6 inches, then you can push down on that flex line and get that. You got to get those hoses up into the engine compartment, up near the radiator. That's probably the hardest part. And then fishing the lines in, just kind of take your time, and they go pretty easy. You know, people are talking about taking off the motor mounts and stuff like that. It's not needed. So total time on this job, it really took about 2.5 hours to get it apart. But then some of it may save you by, like I say, taking the wheel off. Getting to that bolt is much easier through this hole through the wheel well. Getting the drive shaft unhooked, and then putting it back together, it probably took another hour to put it back together. So it wasn't near as bad as I thought it was going to be. So I hope this video helps. I think if I would have had this video, it sure would have helped me. So anyway, I hope it's back together. I hope I don't have any problems with it. But that's the 1999 3/4 ton GMC Sierra 3-door extended cab. So it would have been great if they would have had the original equipment, original hoses, but it doesn't appear that they make them anymore. They just have a different model that fits other pickups. So hopefully this will help you. Thanks for watching. Oh yeah, another thing, oil use, I would say maybe 3/4 of a quart of oil is all it came out. So really somewhere around 3/4 to 1 quart. So it doesn't take very much oil at all. I had just had the oil changed in it, and I figured I wasn't going to dump it for that, so I just reused the filter, stuck her all back together, and added somewhere around 1 quart. So thanks again for watching.